Welcome to the TEM studio, ladies and gentlemen, in the series on flight safety. I want to start something on threat and error management, and the first delivery today is going to be on cockpit distractions. What are those things that keeps us from paying attention to the stuff that is really actually needed? Is it wise to be distracted during the critical phases of flight? And this is what I want to talk about. So first of all, let's have a look at some definitions there. In this case, looking at about the definition of a threat, defined as event or errors. Now look here, it says it can include errors occurs outside the influence of the flight crew. In other words, this is something not caused by us. A threat is something from external that can come in. In other words, it can be the weather, other aircraft, it can be ATC. No, all right, sorry ATC, that wasn't meant to be like that. Anything from outside the cockpit that can interfere inside, that is then called a threat. All right, and it requires the crew attention and management if safety margins are to be maintained. I think a lot of times threats are things that we can determine beforehand, and that's exactly what we want to do. We don't want to wait until we airborne and then look around and by chance we actually become aware of the typical threats of the environment. That's like flying in a special rules area and not expecting to see other aircraft. It's not the way that it works. All right, the next, okay, before we get to the error part, this near miss, I'm sure, is a mock-up. Has it happened somewhere like this? I'm quite sure that it's possible these days with the electronics that we're flying with, that the people can get, in fact, within meters of each other. All right, however, let's have a look at the definition of an error, because remember we talked about threat and error. What is an error? Error is defined as a flight crew actions or inactions that lead to a deviation. In other words, it's very clearly here a deviation from the intentions or expectations. Now, where do we get our expectations from? Expectations is the end result of planning, because we plan certain expectations which we need to meet on the way, on the roadmap until we get to our destination. Yeah, it's a full journey from the outset. From the moment that you start that engine of the aircraft, you're starting with a certain journey, and there will be threats and errors all the way. From the taxi, the takeoff, the climb out, the cruise, approach, final approach, landing, until you're back in the bay to shut down. I took this one as one of the errors because the first thing that happened is there was an engine cut. Now, you'll say to me, but an engine cut, is that a threat or an error? The engine cut itself was a threat, right? The pilots couldn't foresee that. It was something that was contemplated before. In this case, though, what happened is that the engine cut and then the pilot, he actually made an error. He feathered the wrong engine. He feathered the good and serviceable engine. That immediately took that engine offline, and believe me, these guys take quite a while to unfeather. But it's at the stage that they were in this case, it's unforgiving. That's all that I can say. Does it mean they're bad pilots or they're poor pilots? No, they made an error. So the point here is that threats, such as an engine cut, we can sort of anticipate, and we can think in this environment we can have other aircraft that may be on the way, basic stuff like that. However, we must also consider, once a threat is presented to us, what are the errors that we can make? And one of the errors that we can make after takeoff, if there's an engine failure, is to apply the wrong standard operating procedure, all right? Or to just rush in where we could have taken one more minute, one more second. Sorry, I'm talking to the helicopter guys again. And I know at low level, in a Robbie 22, Robbie 44, you haven't got minutes. You've got fractions of a second to decide, to react, and to do your thing. So, but still, it's the same idea between threat and error. And then the next one I've got here is the undesired aircraft state. Undesired is defined as a position, speed, attitude, configuration, aircraft that results from flight crew error, actions, inactions, and clearly reduces the safety margin. In other words, the undesired aircraft state is the aircraft is not in either a configuration or in an attitude that is desirable for the kind of flight that we're doing. To be upside down on an aerobatic aircraft, I mean, when you're busy with aerobatic practice, that's not an undesired state. But in an airliner, that could be. In a Cessna 172, when you're busy with route flying and you find yourself upside down, not a good story. And that also goes, obviously, for your aircraft configuration. And here we're talking about flap settings, power settings, undercarriage, and so on and so forth. Yeah, here we can just see, here's the horizon lying there. This is not a good attitude, and that we would say is then an upset. Just listen to, this was quite clever, and I didn't make this up, I read this up. It says threats, the things that's external and that's coming to us. In other words, it's not something that originates from us. This is coming at us. Threats are coming at us. Why? Errors is the stuff that we make. It is from us. All right. So just remember that threats, something that's from the outside. Errors, something from the inside. Now, remember, I said that I want to talk about the cockpit distractions. So the first thing that I need to say here is that reintroduce this thing about a sterile cockpit. And when I talk about sterile cockpit, there's obviously different ways of interpreting that. And I probably should just go to the next one and explain what I'm saying. Sterile cockpit is definitely not what is happening in this very well-known movie, where the aerosters is now having a very good conversation about aircraft and what's happening. The co-pilot is seriously involved. The captain is seriously involved. And this whole scene, although it was hilariously funny, is the kind of thing that we've got to make sure that we get into. You'll be amazed that we actually do get into that. You know, I sit a lot of times with the guys flying, testing them, and they're game pilots. And I said to him, I would like to do that. And he looks at me, and I said, hey, we're sitting 20 foot above the ground. We're busy chasing a buck. And when I speak, you look at me? Really? It's like you're busy shooting an ILS, and you're concentrating. It's bad weather. And the non-flying pilot at that moment says something, and you say, oh, yes. Or you're looking at this side, and you say, oh, yes. Really? Okay. These, okay, that's mannerisms, but in this case, stuff like this happened. All right. Now, neither is a sterile cockpit an old bully sitting, all right, I should have probably said that. Old person who's sterile himself being in the cockpit does not make it a sterile cockpit. It's got nothing to do with it. What we have is that we actually do need somebody to say, hey, shut up and pay attention to the right stuff. And here you can see very disruptive passengers all the time. Well, that's inter-passenger, but, you know, it's the same thing. Somebody is in the cockpit. And remember, if you're not in an airliner, the cockpit is protected to stay sterile. Nobody can go in. There's a serious protocol between what the cabin crew may and when they may enter and talk to it. So I'm pretty sure that sterile cockpit and sterile cockpit procedures in terms of the bigger boys is all sorted out. But when we get to part 135 and 127, when we fly around our little helicopters in a job or little aircraft on a small charter or what we're doing, the world is different. you are directly interacting with the customers, and it's really, really up to you. Now, let me go back that one. I'm just looking at the critical phases. And first of all, the critical phase that I'm saying here is it's actually basic. You can't, I should have probably started there with pre-start. Because from the moment that you shout prop clear or blades clear or whatever before you start, that's when threats can creep in, and that's where the errors come in. So you have to pay attention to the right stuff. And you don't want to be distracted by stuff that is like a surprise. If you knew about threats in the environment, then it's not a surprise factor that's coming in. And that's why we need to get into this mode of identifying, consciously saying, I see this as a threat, and I understand. Once I do that, we don't recite our errors, okay? We say the threats, and then we say, should I get an engine failure after, I'm going to do this, take here, do that, move that, do that, and. What am I going to do? Talk, move the hands inside, and look where you're supposed to look. While we're on the subject, somebody says to me, okay, and then after, if we get an engine cut here, and they're going through this rhyme, and after engine cut here, I'm going to do that, and once I'm airborne, 30 degrees either side of the nose, and so on. Hey, what are you talking about? The runway that you are on now has got an overshoot area. Look at the damn thing. And say, hey, in this case, I cannot maintain straight if there's no more runway because there are very good big blue gum trees or whatever. I think in Easterplaat, if you take off, then there's nice blocks of flats right in front of you. You've got to recognize that. And then you don't say, I'm going to either turn 30 left. It is within an arc, 30 degrees either side of the nose. But in this case, I can see that I cannot turn left because there is more danger, so I'm going to turn to the right. In fact, if I, for instance, at Tempe takeoff and 01, it might even be so that once I'm airborne, I can actually land back on runway 10. Just to mention, there are various options, but you've got to decide on the option. The bad news is when we get into a phase where we are challenged, and in other words, a threat, or we are threatened by an anomaly on board, and then we act in the incorrect way. That is the error. A pilot, once you sit with an anomaly, I mean, you didn't ask for an engine cut or this or that or the rest. And then it is not who to blame of what went wrong, is how do I fix the situation that I'm in right now? That is why we're doing training. And not to scare you, to actually make you more comfortable so that you can understand what to do when the world just happens around you. Take off up to flight level, and I know now the chopper guys are going to say to me, yeah, you know, but our flight level is low and all that kind of stuff. We can look at all the excuses, and I can say you approach below 10,000 feet, but I know if you're going to fly at flight level 5.5, because you were, you know, doing a normal day charter for a Part 135 and then from the moment that you start leaving your flight level, you're becoming sterile cockpit. All right? That's where you talk to people and. Final approach. Now, why I'm saying final approach, that is the last part of the approach. That when you should be established, VFR conditions, you should be established 500 feet above the ground on the final approach with all interceptions done and the landing configuration set. That's an ICAO standard, all right? If it's IFR, then it's 1,000 feet. The point here is that from that point on, or even before that point when you prepare, you can't get onto the final approach sector of your flight and be busy with other things. The only thing you have to do now is to maintain in your glide or in your approach path and to actually safely land the aircraft, and then obviously there is the landing. Right, we looked at the sterile cockpit in this. All right, we're not going to ask her to do anything with those gloves, but sometimes people think it's the neatness. Remember that sterile cockpit, as we understand it, is, you know, the information that needs to go in and out. But I need to bring something else to you. There's also cockpit ergonomics. What is where? Is it a neat and is it a clean cockpit? And a lot of people that I fly with, I will say, no, fix that up. I like a neat cockpit. Whether that is a bug setting or what, it doesn't matter, or something lying around. You want everything in the right. So ergonomics is going to play a role as well. Right. Basic rules, no chatting. No chatting. Only needed conversation between crew and ATC. Okay. No chatting. No chit-chatting. No deciding on what is nice, what's not nice, what is good, what is not good. Nothing. It cannot be. All right? So get this one. This is not the time to say, oh, do you see this? And, ooh, that. No. Only flight critical inputs. In other words, if there's another aircraft storming onto you, or you and one of the remote runways and a buffalo is, you know, trying to run over you, or, you know, something like that, that's different. No hand signal. You know, a lot of times people want to start talking. Those are all attention grabbers. Sit and do nothing. Well, not you, that's the pilot. Obviously, you're doing the flying. The rest of the people, keep your hands and everything. Don't do anything to distract the pilot. Not paying attention to passenger comfort. No, this is, in the critical phases of flight, don't worry if this guy needs a drink or that one needs this and that and so on. No, they briefed. And that is why in the airlines you've got your little ding-dong saying, ding, you know, now you must sit here and dong, now we can do this and all the rest. That's fine. We haven't got ding-dong systems inside the smaller aircraft. So you've got to become the ding-dong. Okay. Focused 100% on the flight phases. That is where your attention must be. There mustn't be a split of attention. Don't let your attention be stolen or hijacked by anything or anybody else that it cannot help with what's going to happen. This looks quite serious. These guys are flying in, but it looks like they've got everything under control, except that they can't see too much. Well, they're probably on the ILS established. And if I look at this pilot's left hand there, the one that side, if I look at that hand, then he's not either very stressed, because people normally, when they get stressed, that hand would come and it would grip immediately on there as well. He's looking up slightly. The face is lifted up, and on this side I don't see any hands that is trying to even get closer here. So it's safe to say that these guys are not in a bad condition at that moment in time. So let's have a look here at the typical attention stealers, chatty passengers. All right, that is always like that. A door opening, listen now, it happens, you take your helicopter off, the door opens. What do? You take off in your small aircraft, the door opens. What do? Well, I can tell you what not to do. I'm going to say it just now. But for now, these are the things that seriously grab the attention. But it's not, they're not showstoppers, okay? Chatty passenger, these things, we can manage, or should be able to manage that. Okay, here we're looking at a cell phone. We've got incoming calls, incoming messages, alarms that are set that goes off. Really, it's the most amazing thing. A cell phone is something that has got preference in attention over everything else. So I'll tell you just now what I think you should do with your cell phone. Tablets, you know, these tablets that we're flying around, you know, it's just in between a laptop and cell phone. The fact is it's something still, because if you're trying to reference smaller written stuff there and page on it and interface with it, I mean, come on, these things are stealing your attention. During the critical phases of flight, your attention is not needed to be focused inside on something. Yeah, no, you think that you're cool and you can do that, and you've practiced it and you probably got away with it 1,000 times. I'm not worried about the first 1,000 times that you got away with it. I'm worried the 1,001st time. I might be the passenger in the back, and that, to me, is a problem. Poor arranged cockpit ergonomics, you've got to free the controls from interference. Man, we have seen that. Helicopter, people with camera and stuff, and it's all over, and they can switch off hydraulics and they can hook on something, and especially in helicopters where you've got extremely sensitive control inputs, these things are basically devastating. So, you know, there is a protocol, there is something inside. The arrangement of the cockpit, I also say here, equipment and logs need an easy reach, substances and all that. You know, all your lock cards and your maps and stuff, where they, and you can't get hold of them, and it's here and there, and it's all over the place. It can't work. Everything must be an easy reach. And the pilot must not really need to turn his head more than is needed and to grab things from the back seat and stuff like that. Keep your water close to you. You need that little sip, then you need that sip. All right. Okay. I think that point is taken. Whoa, okay. Okay, this guy, obviously, a little bit overcrowded in this cockpit here, I'd say. A lot of distractions. Obviously makes him very, very happy. And I'm pleased to say that it looks like he's managed, well, let me get a different, he's managed here then at least to give him a little bit of a view. Here the view is even more obscured, not much of a view there. Yeah, just remember that on the ground, in the air, we make use of peripheral vision quite a bit. So don't obscure the areas where we'll give you the peripheral cues. Well, okay, can't say much about this one. Antidote required by to guard against attention. First of all, brief the passengers. Work out hand signals to get the passengers' attention to be quiet or when they can speak. And in the helicopter, I mean, you're sitting on top of each other's laps, basically, in the small aircraft as well. So I briefed them. Listen, guys, when we're up there, if at any stage you see a hand like this, it means shut up. Don't want you to say anything, do anything, touch anything, move anything, because I need full concentration. And if I show this, we can talk. But if I show this, you stop. Simple, easy, works every time. Man, I go like this, and then we get airborne, and I go, and everybody sits there. And then I go, chick, chick, yeah, and then they chat, and I go, and everybody sits still. They don't know, but, you know, so I'm also having fun. But all right, never mind. Cell phones, they look, I just want to say this, out of sight, out of mind. Now, I know you're not going to switch your cell phone off. I take it. I know that the cell phone is not necessarily going to interfere with the aircraft's whatever anymore. Okay, I'm happy. It's true. But the cell phone, if it's in your sight and starts ringing, you're going to look at that. And you're not going to look at the critical phase of flight in front of you. You're going to look at that. And that, to me, is a problem. Because now it's insignificant. It's a little message that's coming in or some rubbish. What are you going to do if it's a phone call anyway? So, it's taken off. No. Come on. Switch the damn thing on silent and put it out of your way. Later on, if you need to see if there's anything once you're at cruising level and stuff like that, small aircraft, I mean, we get a signal up to flight level 75, 85, no problem, all right? So it's just one of those things. Then, set up frequencies and other information so that you don't become involved in critical phases. Before I enter a critical phase, I set up the next frequencies that I'm going to use. I do this, everything that I'm going to use. I really doing my best to stay ahead of the aircraft. I actually set myself up and I prepare. It's not now when I'm in the critical phase, oh, where's the landing information? Where's this chart, or where's that, or what was that frequency again? Done already, not a problem. Okay, so it's a little bit more anticipation. A tablet may only be used for navigation purposes, even so, and I know that people use it for, it is when we start interfacing with this stuff and we look in here. That is my problem, because your head is supposed to be there. We're talking about VFR flight here, okay? Not IFR flight. But then you don't really get an IFR takeoff, you know, and I'm trying to say that certain critical stages of flight, it doesn't really matter. You don't get bogged down. There is a set-down procedure. It's a discipline, all right? Don't get too cool and relaxed, because that's not the time to be so relaxed. Okay, cockpit ergonomics. All that I'm saying is, you know, you can't change where the dials are and where everything is. But you can set up, do I leave the water? Where's my map? Where's this? Where's that? Everything is nicely arranged within easy reach. And that's what I refer now. This is the part where the pilot can ensure the ergonomics. Oh, it's fine if you've got passengers in the back and you say, there's scratch there in my bag and there's a this and that. Yeah, no, that's fine. But if you haven't got passengers, then you can't scratch in no bag nowhere. Now, people have tried this before, and it doesn't work. You cannot leave your seat in your aircraft. You will die. And the aircraft will be written off. We'll bury both of you. When a door opens in flight, stay calm. Reduce the speed. And land as soon as it is practicable. It just means when the time is good. You don't have to force it. You don't have to slam the helicopter down on the ground. You don't have to try and fly the helicopter with other hands and grabbing the doors. Silly. That door's not going to fall off. It's not going to blow off. Wow. I haven't heard it. That it's, you got the right little latches and stuff. It goes open and it will sit open that little bit. And that's it. Reduce the speed, come in and go and land. When you're single crew, look, when you're multi-crew, it's different because there will be other people that can help closing doors. But if the door is on my side of a Robinson 44, 22, and this guy's trying to come over here, they can interfere with the hydraulic switches, they can bump. Hey, this guy that's going to interfere here must really understand the complexities of what we're doing here. I won't let any silly fool stretch over me in the cockpit. That's why well practiced left elbow. And same aircraft types, well practiced right elbow. Okay, never mind. But just reduce speed and land the aircraft. On an aircraft, I've also seen there where people go into a flat panic. Oh, the door's open, blah, blah, blah. So what? It's not a pan, not for a Cessna 172. When we start looking at bigger aircraft and where it can open up, of course, that can be quite a critical to the phase of flight. I just want us in the smaller regime also to have a look and to say, come on, there's nothing to overstress yourself about. Do a normal circuit, land the aircraft. Somebody said, "Ooh, my door opened." 3/4 through the flight. Okay, now we know your door's open. There's no way that you're going to close a Cessna 172's door in flight. Well, probably if you've got both hands and you will ram it at your best is best. Why? Things are going to fall off. Airflow will ensure that it won't go completely open, but it will be just here close to the cockpit. It's really not such a big deal. Is it big deal if the cargo compartment door for 747 or 737 or whatever opens up? Of course, that is a big deal. It is a big deal. This is not what I'm talking about, all right? This is normal, small aeroplane stuff. Yeah, you know, it's, when you work with stuff like that, beautiful cockpit, you can see there's a little bit of threat, if you may, outside, not much. They've got everything set up here. There's the weather radar. I can't even see that there's anything particularly on the weather radar that's showing or anything. But the fact is that they're pretty organized. Now, organized, I should have only used two words here, and that's organized and safe. Because disciplined means organized and procedural means organized. Okay, so if you can remember S-O-P, safety, organized, procedural. Okay, we've got to make up these things as we go. But remember, we must remember that. You know, every week we talk about this, and we shouldn't do this, and we must do that. And, sorry, at least every month we do this kind of thing. And then people go out there and they say to me, oh, that was nice. I said, well, you know, it's not really. It's only nice if you've learned something. But learning something means that you must apply that something. Otherwise, you haven't learned anything. Then you've just reached more information to fall in that bottomless pit of useless information. In other words, you are just a gatherer of rubbish. Information is only good, and it's only learned if you can apply it. Otherwise, it's got absolutely no meaning. If you do not apply, then it's just as good as you didn't know that. Then it's meaningless. So it's not what I do here is the penny drop. I hope so. I hope the penny is dropping at this thing. Conclusion? Right, first of all, plan around predetermined attention stealers. Obviously, we now know there's certain things that can steal our attention, and we're going to set ourselves up not to pay attention to that which get us airborne, and that which keeps us safe. Decide what are the important things. And it's definitely not that call from, and it is probably somebody that you didn't want to speak to anyway. And if it is somebody that you wanted to speak to, that's cool. Because if you did, you cannot speak to that person. So don't answer that person now. Do your job, and when it's absolutely safe, then speak to the person. And all of them say, sorry man, I'm flying, I'm critical stage of flight. They say, oh, sorry for bothering. They really don't want to bother you. They don't want to put your life in danger. So don't become silly from your side now, just because you've got a call. I've got to say this. I remember I was in the era, and a few people probably around, in the era when we didn't have cell phones. They didn't exist. Well, we didn't even know that they're working on stuff like that. All right, but then we were before the computer age. But okay, there weren't cell phones. In the beginning, if you had cell phone, one of these big bricks, and you got a call, you're important, man. Hello, this is Charlie speaking. And then it's so super cool. You've got this mobile phone. But that fad has left, eh? You can't impress anybody more. In fact, it's become a nuisance. You impress me more by ignoring and not answering the call than by answering the call. Yes, for sure. Impulsive reaction to anomalies is costly. No impulsive. Respect the critical phases of flight. And that is the mindset that I want to say to yourself. Just come on, look at the specific phases of flight and now start respecting it. Put all the other things away. Pay attention to what attention needs to be paid to. at that specific time. In fact, it's only for your own goodwill, to be quite honest. And then plan, brief, organize the cockpit, and act accordingly. Plan ahead. Now I know what all the threats is, and I've beefed myself up that I can minimize the errors in certain cases. I've now briefed the passengers and the ground and everybody quite properly. And now I'm going to organize my cockpit so that it is ergonomically set up for me. And now I'm going to do the job according to the plan. Plan, brief, organize, fly. Should an emergency occur, your attention will be in the correct place. Yes, of course. You're going to get airborne, you're going to go here, and your attention will be. Because I'm right there, and now something goes wrong. I've got hands on. My expectation is not that I'm going to get bad, something that, but my attention is everything with the aircraft, and I have got this built in here that when there's an anomaly of a delta occurring, that I can actually see it at that moment in time. Right, and that, I believe, will bring us then to the end of cockpit distractions. All right, go out there, just go and think about these things. Don't let technology become your curse. It's really a blessing. But like all blessings, there's a time for it. Okay? Think about that. Until next time.